Hi, my name is Carrie Larson, and today I'll be presenting Peachtree Case B. So question 1A asks, what's the nominal rate of return and what's the effective annual rate of return? For the nominal rate of return, we take the annual dividend, which is 4.32, and divide it by the price per share, which is $48. That gives us a nominal rate of 9%. Then we take that nominal rate to calculate the effective rate of return. Once doing that, the effective rate of return equals 9.31%. So question 1B asks us to calculate the current value per share. Now these shares are preferred stock, so we must use the preferred stock price equation. So first we take the preferred dividend, 9.75, and then divide it by the rate, which is 8%. Then we must take into account the sinking provision fund. So since 60,000 out of the 300,000 shares are being redeemed at par, that would be 20%. So we multiply that times the stock price we got earlier. And that gives us a total of $24.38. So question 2A asks us to find the expected rate of return at the beginning of 1992. To do this, we must look at the next period's dividend, which would be 1.91. And then we divide that by the price. The current market price is 22.26. Then we add that to the growth rate of 6%, and we get a total of 14.57% expected return. Question 2B asks us to find the dividend yield and the expected capital gains yield. To do this, we first find the dividend yield. We take next period's dividend and divide it by the price. So 1.91 divided by 22.26. This gives us a dividend yield of 8.57%. Then to find the capital gains yield, we just subtract that from the expected rate of return that we found earlier. So 14.57% minus 8.57%. This gives us the capital gains yield of 6%. Note that this also equals the growth rate. So in question 2C, they ask us to compare capital gains yield with dividend yield. Under the constant growth assumptions, capital gains yield should equal the growth, and when combining that with the dividend yield, they both equal the expected return. Since the expected return was calculated earlier as well as the dividend yield, subtracting the two results resulted in the capital gains yield. Therefore, they are all interrelated. In this instance, capital gains yield did result in equaling the growth rate as well. In question 2D, it asks what conditions must hold true to use the Gordon model. To use the Gordon model, the stock must have future dividends that will be growing at a constant rate. The model bases its calculation on the present value of the long and continuing series of consistent growth dividends. The dividends must also be payable in 1 year. So question 3 involves looking at a certain dividend schedule. So this is just a table showing that dividend schedule and the different values that we will be using in further calculations in question 3. So question 3A asks what was the value of the stock towards the end of 1991. So to do this, we took the dividend of 180 and divided it by the rate, which was 13.5%, minus the growth rate of 6%. This gave us a price of $24. For question 3B, they asked us to find the price at the end of 1992. This would use D1, which is 191, and divide it once again by the rate minus the growth. And then that gives us a price of $25.44. And question 3C that asked us what was the expected stock price at the end of 1993. So then we would take D2, which is 2.02, and divide that once again by the rate minus the growth, and that gives us a price of $26.97. So question 3D asks us to find the dividend yield, the capital gains yield, and the total return once again. So the dividend yield we find again by taking the dividend and dividing it by the price, and we get a yield of 7.5%. And then capital gains yield usually equals the growth rate, so it was 6%, and also you can mathematically find this by taking the required rate of return minus the dividend yield, resulting in 6% as well. And to find the total return, we add the dividend yield plus the capital gains yield, and that gives us 13.5%. So in question 3E, it asks us to find the value of the stock when dividends are constantly $1.80 for 5 years and then start to grow at 6% rate. So to do this, I mapped out the dividends and found the future dividend once it start growing to find the price and put that in the cash flows column, and then found the net present value of all of the cash flows. And that resulted in a price of $19.76. Note that this value is lower than the price in Part A, and this is because the dividends do not begin to increase until the 6th year. In Part A, they were increasing every year. So question 3F asks us to find the expected rate of return using the 1992 stock price. So to do this, we take the next period's dividends of 1.91 and divide it by that stock price, and then add it to the growth rate of 7.5 as discussed earlier in the problem. And that gives us an expected rate of return of 16.07%. So question 3G asks us if the 6% growth rate is reasonable to use, and looking at the dividend trends through the past years, the dividends seem to be increasing by 10 cents from 1989 to 1992, but then in 1993 the dividend increased by 20 cents, making the growth rate between 1992 and 1993 10.53%. So that is kind of like an outlier value. So if we take that out of account, 6% could be reasonable, but looking at the growth rates of 5.88% to 6.67%, but when averaging all of the growth rates, it comes out to 7.33%. So it just depends on whether 1993 is an irregularity or not. So question 3H actually questions whether 7.5% is a reasonable growth rate, and when calculating the actual growth rate by taking the retention ratio times the return on equity, I get a growth rate of 5.35%. So that goes against the 7.5% that they are using. And when looking at the earnings and dividends, they are closer to that 5.35% as well. So 7.5% is not a good rate to use.